At 23 years old, Rachel Jones thought she had life figured out. She was wrong. Dead wrong. What she discovered when she returned from her second deployment in Afghanistan would shatter everything she believed about family, loyalty, and trust. But sometimes, when everything falls apart, that's exactly when you discover what you're truly made of. This is the story of how a young woman's greatest betrayal became her most powerful transformation.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rachel Jones had always been different from her family, and growing up in Cedar Falls, Iowa, that difference felt like a constant weight on her shoulders. While her older brother Marcus spent his weekends at the local bars and her younger sister Emma focused on Instagram followers and weekend parties, Rachel found herself drawn to structure, discipline, and something bigger than the small-town gossip that seemed to consume everyone around her. The Jones family lived in a modest two-story house on Elm Street, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's business and secrets were currency traded over backyard fences. Her father, Robert Jones, worked at the John Deere manufacturing plant, the same job he'd held for over 20 years. Her mother, Patricia, managed the front desk at the local dentist's office and spent most evenings glued to reality TV shows, offering running commentary to anyone within earshot. "Rachel's always been the responsible one," Patricia would tell the church ladies during their weekly coffee gatherings. "Ever since she was little, she'd be the one making sure everyone had their homework done and their chores finished." What Patricia didn't mention was how this responsibility often felt more like burden than blessing for Rachel, who found herself constantly mediating family disputes and covering for her siblings' mistakes. The house itself reflected the family's practical approach to life. Worn but comfortable furniture filled rooms that hadn't been updated since the 1990s. Family photos lined the mantelpiece, chronicling years of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, and graduation ceremonies. But if you looked closely, you'd notice that Rachel appeared in fewer of these photos as the years went on, not because she wasn't present, but because she was usually the one behind the camera, documenting moments rather than living in them. Rachel's bedroom, tucked away on the second floor, stood in stark contrast to the rest of the house. Military recruitment posters covered one wall alongside maps of countries she dreamed of visiting. Her desk was meticulously organized, with college textbooks stacked in perfect order and a small American flag positioned next to her laptop. While her siblings' rooms looked like tornadoes had swept through them, Rachel's space reflected the discipline and order she craved in all aspects of her life. The decision to join the military hadn't been sudden or impulsive. Rachel had been planning it since her sophomore year in high school, when a visiting Army recruiter spoke to her ROTC class about opportunities for young people seeking direction and purpose. Unlike many of her classmates who saw military service as a last resort, Rachel viewed it as her first choice, a pathway to something meaningful. "You sure about this, Rach?" her father had asked one evening when she announced her plans over dinner. Robert's weathered hands gripped his coffee mug a little tighter than usual. "It's a dangerous world out there, especially for young women." Rachel remembered the mixture of pride and concern in her father's eyes. Robert Jones was a good man, perhaps too trusting, and certainly too generous, but he'd always supported his daughter's ambitions even when he didn't fully understand them. Her mother's reaction had been more complex, a blend of worry, confusion, and something that might have been relief at the prospect of one less person to worry about in their already chaotic household. "The Army will give me structure, Dad, purpose, and I'll be able to send money home to help with college funds for Marcus and Emma." Rachel's response revealed something fundamental about her character. Even in pursuing her own dreams, she was thinking about how to help her family. Marcus, then 25, and working sporadically at various construction jobs, had laughed when she made the announcement. "Little sister playing soldier, that's rich. You know they're going to break you down and build you back up, right? Sure you can handle that?" Emma, barely 18 at the time, and more interested in her phone than family dinner conversation, had looked up long enough to say, "Does this mean you won't be here to help me with my college applications?" The selfishness of the question stung, but Rachel had already grown accustomed to being seen primarily as a problem solver rather than a person with her own needs and dreams.
The months leading up to her departure for basic training were filled with a strange mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Rachel worked extra shifts at the local grocery store where she'd been employed since turning 16, saving every penny she could. Unlike her peers who spent their earnings on clothes, entertainment, and gas for weekend adventures, Rachel had always been purposeful with her money. She opened a savings account at First National Bank of Cedar Falls and watched the balance grow with the satisfaction of someone who understood the value of delayed gratification. During those final weeks at home, Rachel found herself observing her family with new eyes. She noticed how her father's shoulder sagged a little more each day when he returned from the plant, how the repetitive nature of his work was slowly wearing him down. She watched her mother navigate the daily stress of managing a household on a tight budget, juggling bills and trying to keep peace between three very different children. She saw how Marcus drifted from job to job, never quite finding his footing, and how Emma seemed oblivious to the financial pressures that kept their parents awake at night. These observations didn't breed resentment in Rachel. Instead, they strengthened her resolve. Military service would give her the tools and resources to help her family in ways that staying in Cedar Falls never could. She envisioned sending home regular payments, helping Marcus get proper job training, supporting Emma through college, and eventually giving her parents the financial security they'd never had. The night before she left for Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, the family gathered for what Patricia called Rachel's farewell dinner. She'd prepared Rachel's favorite meal, pot roast with mashed potatoes and green beans, and even baked a chocolate cake from scratch. The conversation was lighter than usual, filled with jokes and memories rather than the typical discussions about unpaid bills or work frustrations. "Promise me you'll call every week," Patricia said as she served dessert, her voice carrying a tremor that betrayed her attempts at cheerfulness. "Promise me you'll stay safe," Robert added, reaching across the table to squeeze his daughter's hand. "Promise me you'll send pictures of all the hot military guys," Emma chimed in, earning a laugh from everyone and breaking some of the tension that had settled over the meal. Marcus, uncharacteristically serious, raised his beer bottle in a toast. "Promise me you'll remember where you came from, sis. Cedar Falls will always be home, no matter how far you travel or how much you accomplish out there." That night, lying in her childhood bed for what she didn't know would be the last time for many months, Rachel felt a complex mixture of emotions. Excitement about the adventure ahead battled with sadness about leaving behind the only life she'd ever known. But underneath it all was a deep sense of rightness about her choice. For the first time in her life, she was doing something purely for herself while still maintaining her commitment to helping others. The morning of her departure, the entire family gathered on the front porch as a taxi waited to take Rachel to the bus station. The Iowa sunrise painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, and the familiar sounds of their neighborhood, dogs barking, lawnmowers starting up, children calling to friends, created a soundtrack of home that Rachel would carry with her across continents. As the taxi pulled away from Elm Street, Rachel watched her family through the rear window until they became distant figures, then shadows, then memories. She didn't cry, that wasn't her way, but she made a silent promise to herself and to them. She would make this sacrifice count. She would become the person her family could be proud of, the daughter who fulfilled her potential and lifted others up in the process. The girl leaving Cedar Falls that morning had dreams, plans, and an unshakable faith in the people she loved most. She had no way of knowing that this faith would be tested in ways she never imagined, or that the very people she was leaving to protect would become the source of her greatest betrayal. But that morning, driving through the Iowa countryside toward her future, Rachel Jones was still innocent of such possibilities.
She was still a young woman who believed that love and loyalty were reciprocal, that family meant forever, and that doing the right thing would always be enough. She was about to learn how wrong she could be.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
18 months into her military service, Rachel Jones had transformed from the uncertain young woman who'd left Cedar Falls into a confident soldier with clear purpose. Her first deployment to Afghanistan had been a revelation. Not the terrifying experience her family had feared, but a proving ground where she discovered capabilities she never knew she possessed. Now stationed at Bagram Airfield as a supply logistics specialist, Rachel had found her niche in the complex machinery of military operations. Her natural organizational skills and attention to detail made her indispensable to her unit. While other soldiers complained about the bureaucracy and paperwork, Rachel thrived in the structured environment where her contributions had measurable impact on mission success. "Jones, you've got mail," Sergeant First Class Williams called out during the morning briefing in early October. The mail call was always a highlight, a connection to home that made the dust, heat, and constant vigilance of deployment more bearable. Rachel's face lit up as she recognized her father's handwriting on a thick envelope, unusual since most family correspondence came through email these days. That evening, sitting in her cramped quarters while her bunkmate Sarah Martinez cleaned her equipment, Rachel opened the letter. Her familiar scrawl filled 3 pages, but something in the tone felt different from his usual updates about work and weather. "Honey," the letter began, "I hope you're staying safe over there. Your mother and I are so proud of what you're doing. I wanted to write because there's been a situation here at home, and I need to ask for your help." Rachel's stomach tightened. Her father had never been one to ask for help, especially not from his children. She continued reading, her concern growing with each paragraph. Marcus lost his job at the construction company last month. Something about missing too many days, though he says it wasn't his fault. Emma's been struggling at community college. Her grades aren't good enough to keep her scholarship, and we can't afford to pay for her classes without it. Your mother's hours got cut at the dental office because Dr. Peterson brought in some new computerized system, and they don't need her there as much anymore. The litany of problems felt overwhelming, but Rachel had been sending money home regularly for exactly these kinds of emergencies. Her military pay wasn't enormous, but she lived frugally on base and had been able to send $800 home every month since completing basic training. That should have been enough to help with these kinds of setbacks. "I know you've been generous with sending money, and we've been grateful," her father continued, "but everything seems to be hitting at once. The house needs a new roof. We've been putting buckets out when it rains, but it's getting worse. The car needs major repairs, and without your mother working full-time, we're struggling to keep up with the mortgage payments." Rachel set the letter down for a moment, staring at the beige walls of her quarters. Around her, the sounds of military life continued. Soldiers talking in the hallway, the distant hum of generators, the occasional announcement over the base communication system. But her mind was entirely focused on the image of her parents struggling with problems that her military service was supposed to help solve. The final page contained the request that would change everything. "I hate to ask this, Rachel, but we need a larger amount of help, something that could really make a difference and get us back on our feet. I've been talking to people at the bank, and they mentioned something called a military hardship loan. It's specifically for families of deployed service members, and the interest rates are much better than regular loans. The paperwork requires your signature since you're the service member, but it would allow us to consolidate everything. Fix the roof, handle Emma's tuition, help Marcus get some job training, and catch up on the bills." Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she read the details. The loan would be for $50,000, a sum that seemed enormous to someone who'd never had more than a few $1,000s in savings. But her father's explanation made it seem manageable. The monthly payments would be automatically deducted from your military pay, but it's spread out over 10 years, so it won't be a burden on you. And honey, this would really change everything for us. We could finally get ahead instead of always scrambling to catch up. I know it's a big ask, but you've always been the one we could count on. The letter concluded with reassurances about how proud they were of her service and promises to pay her back as soon as they were able, although the loan terms wouldn't require it.
Her father had even included the loan paperwork, with yellow sticky notes marking where she needed to sign. "You okay, Jones?" Sarah asked, looking up from her rifle cleaning. "You look like someone just told you Christmas was canceled." Rachel folded the letter carefully, her mind racing. "Family stuff," she said simply, not ready to discuss the complexity of her emotions with anyone else.
That night, she lay awake on her narrow military cot, staring at the ceiling and thinking about home. She could picture her parents sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by bills and worrying about problems that seemed insurmountable on her father's plant worker salary. She imagined Emma having to drop out of college, her dreams of becoming a teacher derailed by financial constraints. She thought about Marcus, already struggling with direction in life, falling further behind without proper training or education. The money itself didn't concern her as much as she might have expected. Military service had taught her that financial security was less important than purpose and contribution. If taking on this debt meant her family could stabilize and thrive, it seemed like a worthy sacrifice. After all, wasn't this exactly why she joined the military in the first place? To be able to help the people she loved? Over the next few days, Rachel found herself distracted during routine duties. While processing supply requisitions and coordinating equipment distributions, part of her mind was always back in Cedar Falls, calculating how the loan money could transform her family's situation. She imagined her parents' relief, Emma's gratitude, and Marcus finally having the resources to build a stable career. "You've been quiet lately," observed Lieutenant Rebecca Foster during their weekly team meeting. Rachel respected Lieutenant Foster, a career officer who'd mentored several young soldiers through their first deployments. "Everything good on the home front?" Rachel hesitated, then decided to share her dilemma with someone whose judgment she trusted. She explained the situation without going into specific financial details, focusing on her family struggles and the opportunity the loan represented. Lieutenant Foster listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. "It sounds like you're dealing with a lot of pressure from home," she said when Rachel finished. "That's not uncommon during deployment. Families sometimes don't realize how difficult it can be to make major financial decisions when you're thousands of miles away and focused on mission requirements." "But if I can help them, shouldn't I says. That's part of why I'm here, to be able to provide for my family in ways I couldn't back home." "That's admirable, Jones, but I'd encourage you to take some time before making any major commitments. Maybe talk to the financial counselor on base. They can help you understand the long-term implications of different options." Rachel appreciated the advice, but something in her heart had already decided. This was her family. They'd raised her, supported her dreams, and been there through every challenge of her young life. When they needed her most, how could she hesitate? That evening, she video called home using the base's communication center. The connection was grainy and kept cutting out, but she could see her parents clearly enough to notice the stress lines around her father's eyes and the way her mother's smile seemed forced. "Did you get Dad's letter?" her mother asked after the initial pleasantries about Rachel's health and safety. "I did," Rachel replied. "I've been thinking about it a lot." "We wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate, honey," her father said, his voice heavy with reluctance. "I know it's a big responsibility to put on you." "Dad, you don't have to apologize for asking for help. That's what family does." Rachel's words came from a place of genuine love and commitment. "I want to do this. If it can make things better for you guys, then it's worth it." The relief on her parents' faces was immediate and profound. Her mother actually started crying, and her father's voice broke when he said, "I don't know how we got so lucky to have a daughter like you." After ending the call, Rachel returned to her quarters and carefully filled out the loan paperwork. Each signature felt significant, like she was writing her name not just on legal documents, but on a promise to her family. She was committing to 10 years of payments, but she was also investing in the people who mattered most to her. The next morning, she overnighted the signed documents back to Cedar Falls, including a letter telling her family how much she loved them and how proud she was to be able to help them during their difficult time.
She also transferred an additional $1,200 from her personal savings to help with immediate expenses while the loan was being processed. As she walked back from the post office, the Afghan sun beating down on her desert camouflage uniform, Rachel felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Military service was more than following orders and completing missions. It was about becoming the kind of person who could make a real difference in the lives of others. She had no way of knowing that the very act of love and sacrifice she had just committed to would soon become the source of the deepest betrayal she'd ever experience. For now, she was simply a daughter helping her family, a soldier doing what soldiers do, putting others before herself and taking care of the people that mattered most. In her quarters that night, she fell asleep easily for the first time in weeks, dreaming of her parents' gratitude and her siblings' bright futures, completely unaware that she'd just signed away far more than money.
3 weeks after sending the signed loan documents, Rachel received confirmation that the $50,000 had been approved and transferred to her parents' account. The relief in her father's voice during their next call was palpable, and for the first time in months, she heard genuine laughter from her mother in the background. Emma had called separately to thank her, gushing about being able to stay in college, while Marcus sent a rare text message promising to make the most of this chance, sis. But with the loan came an unexpected shift in Rachel's military experience. The financial counselor on base, Staff Sergeant David Chen, had requested a meeting after processing the paperwork for the automatic pay deductions that would begin with her next paycheck. "Private Jones," he said, reviewing her file in his small office adjacent to the base finance center, "I want to make sure you understand the commitment you've made. With this loan payment, your disposable income is going to be significantly reduced for the next 10 years. Rachel shifted in her chair, suddenly feeling defensive. "I understand the terms, Sergeant. My family needed help, and I was able to provide it." Staff Sergeant Chen, a career soldier who'd seen dozens of young service members make financial decisions they'd later regret, leaned forward with genuine concern. "I'm not questioning your motives, but I am going to strongly recommend that you consider taking on some additional duties that come with extra pay. There are opportunities for advancement and specialization that could offset these payments." This conversation marked Rachel's first step into a different phase of military service. Instead of being content with her current role in supply logistics, she now needed to think strategically about career advancement and income enhancement. The loan hadn't just helped her family, it had fundamentally altered her own relationship with the military and her future prospects. "What kind of opportunities?" Rachel asked, her interest genuine. She'd always been ambitious, but financial necessity was now adding urgency to her career planning. "The Army has a critical language incentive pay program," Staff Sergeant Chen explained. "If you can demonstrate proficiency in Dari or Pashto, there's an additional $300 monthly stipend. With your deployment experience and logistics background, you'd also be eligible for specialized training programs that come with both rank advancement and pay increases." Rachel left that meeting with a folder full of information about language training, leadership development programs, and specialized certifications. What had begun as a simple loan to help family had evolved into a comprehensive career strategy. She was crossing a threshold from being a competent soldier to becoming someone who needed to maximize every opportunity the military offered. That evening, she called her friend and former bunkmate, Specialist Maria Rodriguez, who had rotated back to Fort Campbell in Kentucky 2 months earlier. Maria had always been the more pragmatic of the two, and Rachel valued her perspective on military career decisions. "So you're basically locked in for the long haul now," Maria observed after hearing about the loan. $50,000 is serious money. You can't just do your 4 years and get out anymore." The reality of this statement hit Rachel harder than she had expected. Before the loan, she had options. She could complete her initial service commitment and pursue civilian career opportunities, or she could stay in the military because she wanted to. Now, the financial obligation meant that military service wasn't just her choice anymore, it was her necessity. "Maybe that's not a bad thing," Rachel replied, trying to convince herself as much as Maria. "I'm good at this job, and the stability is something my family needs right now." "Just make sure you're making decisions for the right reasons," Maria warned.
I've seen soldiers get trapped by financial obligations, and it changes how they approach everything. Don't let the money make you forget why you joined in the first place. This conversation planted a seed of doubt that Rachel tried to ignore, but it grew stronger over the following weeks. She threw herself into studying Dari, spending 2 hours every evening after duty learning vocabulary and grammar structures. The language learning was challenging, but rewarding, connecting her more deeply to the Afghan communities she encountered during supply runs to forward operating bases. Her commanding officer, Major Patricia Sullivan, noticed her increased dedication and called her in for a performance review that hadn't been scheduled. "Jones, your recent work has been exceptional," Major Sullivan began, consulting Rachel's file. "Your proficiency ratings have improved 20% over the last month, and I understand you're pursuing language certification on your own time." "Yes, ma'am. I'm trying to maximize my professional development opportunities." Major Sullivan studied Rachel carefully. She was a veteran of 3 deployments and had developed an instinct for recognizing soldiers who were pushing themselves for the wrong reasons. "Is everything all right on the personal front? Sometimes when soldiers suddenly increase their professional intensity, it's because they're dealing with stress in other areas."
Rachel hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I took on some financial obligations to help my family, ma'am. I'm just making sure I can meet those responsibilities while continuing to serve effectively." "Financial obligations can be a double-edged sword in military service," Major Sullivan replied thoughtfully. "They can motivate excellence, but they can also create pressure that affects judgment. I want you to know that if you ever need guidance navigating those pressures, my door is open." This offer of support meant more to Rachel than Major Sullivan probably realized. For the first time since signing the loan documents, she felt like someone understood the complexity of her situation without judging her decisions. Her relationship with her family during this period was complicated by the loan's impact on their dynamics. During their weekly calls, there was a subtle but noticeable shift in how they interacted with her. Her parents were more deferential, more careful about complaining about minor problems. Emma seemed to view her as a financial resource first and sister second. Marcus, surprisingly, was the only one who treated her the same as before. "How's the military treating you, sis?" he asked during one of their rare one-on-one conversations when he happened to answer the phone. "It's good. Challenging, but good. How's the job training going?" Rachel had learned that part of the loan money was being used to send Marcus to a welding certification program. "It's harder than I expected, but I'm sticking with it. I know what this opportunity cost you, Rachel. I'm not going to waste it." His words carried a weight of understanding that Rachel hadn't heard from the rest of her family. Marcus might have been the least responsible family member historically, but he seemed to be the only one who truly grasped the magnitude of her sacrifice. As winter approached in Afghanistan, Rachel found herself settling into a new rhythm. Her days were filled with regular logistics duties, language study, and additional training modules for potential promotion. Her evenings were spent maintaining correspondence with family and developing professional relationships with soldiers who could help advance her career. She also began forming a friendship with Sergeant Michael Torres, a career soldier who specialized in military finance and benefits optimization. Torres had been in the Army for 8 years and had developed a reputation for helping other soldiers navigate the complex world of military compensation and career advancement. "The key is thinking long-term," Torres explained during one of their conversations in the dining facility. "A lot of soldiers make decisions based on their current situation, but military careers are like chess games. You need to think several moves ahead." "What do you mean specifically?" Rachel asked, genuinely interested in his strategic approach. "Well, you took on a significant financial obligation, which actually puts you in a strong position if you leverage it correctly. You're motivated to advance quickly, you've got family support for a long-term military commitment, and you're already exceeding performance standards. Those factors together make you a prime candidate for accelerated promotion programs." Torres introduced Rachel to other soldiers who had successfully navigated similar situations, creating a network of mentors and peers who understood the realities of balancing military service with family financial responsibilities. This community became crucial to her professional development, providing insights and opportunities she wouldn't have discovered on her own.
One of these connections led to Rachel being recommended for a specialized logistics management course that would take place during her mid-deployment leave. Instead of using her 2 weeks of leave to return home to Iowa, she would attend an intensive training program in Germany that could qualify her for promotion to corporal and assignment to higher responsibility positions. The decision to forego home leave was difficult, but strategic. The course completion would mean an immediate pay increase and better positioning for future advancement. Given her financial obligations, the professional benefits outweighed the personal cost of not seeing family. When she called to explain this decision, her parents' reaction was understanding, but tinged with disappointment. "We miss you, honey, but we're proud of how seriously you're taking your career. Do what you need to do." Her father added, "Just remember to take care of yourself too. We don't want you burning yourself out trying to take care of everyone else." This conversation marked another threshold crossing for Rachel. She was no longer just a daughter who happened to be in the military. She was becoming a career soldier whose family relationships were one important factor among many in her decision-making process. As she prepared for the specialized training program, Rachel reflected on how much had changed since she'd first arrived in Afghanistan. The loan had been intended to help her family, but it had fundamentally altered her relationship with military service, her career trajectory, and even her sense of personal identity. She was committed now, not just to the loan payments, but to a version of herself that she was still discovering. The young woman from Cedar Falls who had joined the military to help her family was evolving into someone who needed to excel in the military to maintain that help. It was a subtle but significant transformation, and she was only beginning to understand its implications. The threshold she was crossing led to not just new professional opportunities, but to a different way of thinking about loyalty, sacrifice, and the complex relationship between personal dreams and family obligations. She couldn't yet see where this path would lead, but she was fully committed to walking it.
The specialized logistics management course in Ramstein, Germany, proved to be more demanding than Rachel had anticipated. For 2 intensive weeks, she was immersed in advanced supply chain theory, crisis resource allocation, and multi-theater coordination systems that pushed her analytical abilities to their limits. The other attendees were seasoned NCOs with years more experience, and Rachel quickly realized she was fighting an uphill battle to prove she belonged in their ranks. "Jones, you're falling behind on the procurement simulation," Sergeant First Class Williams observed during the 4th day of training. "In real-world scenarios, hesitation costs lives and missions." The comment stung because it was accurate. Rachel's perfectionist tendencies, which had served her well in routine logistics work, were becoming a liability in high-pressure decision-making exercises. She was overthinking scenarios that required quick, confident choices based on incomplete information. That evening, she sat alone in her temporary quarters, surrounded by training materials and feeling overwhelmed for the first time since joining the military. The financial pressure from the loan payments, the professional pressure to excel, and the emotional pressure of being far from family were converging in ways she hadn't expected. She found herself questioning whether she had bitten off more than she could chew. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Hey sis, wanted you to know I passed my first welding certification exam. Couldn't have done it without your help. Hope you're kicking ass over there." The message provided exactly the motivation she needed. Her sacrifice was making a real difference in her brother's life, giving him opportunities and confidence he'd never had before. That reminder of purpose helped her refocus on the immediate challenges, rather than getting lost in abstract worries about the future. The next morning, Rachel approached Sergeant Williams with a request that surprised both of them. "Sergeant, I'd like permission to shadow the night shift exercises. I think I need more exposure to the decision-making process under different conditions." Williams studied her carefully. Most soldiers would have asked for additional study time or easier assignments. Rachel was asking for more challenges. "That's going to mean 3 hours of sleep per night for the rest of the course," he warned. "I understand, Sergeant. I need to get better at this, and I don't think classroom theory alone is going to do it."
This decision marked a turning point in Rachel's approach to professional development. Instead of trying to avoid her weaknesses, she began deliberately seeking out situations that exposed and challenged them. The night shift exercises were conducted with skeleton crews and compressed time frames, forcing participants to make rapid decisions with minimal consultation. During one particularly complex scenario involving a simulated supply disruption to multiple forward operating bases, Rachel found herself in command of a team tasked with rerouting critical medical supplies while maintaining operational security. The exercise lasted 6 hours, with new complications introduced every hour. Supply Convoy Alpha is reporting engine failure 20 clicks from FOB Jackson. Medical personnel at FOB Jackson have wounded requiring immediate surgery. You have 2 backup convoys available, but rerouting either one leaves other bases vulnerable. What's your decision? Rachel's mind raced through the implications. She had learned to think in terms of acceptable risk rather than perfect solutions. Reroute Convoy Charlie to FOB Jackson immediately. Contact Convoy Bravo and have them prepared to cover Charlie's original route with a delayed timeline. Simultaneously, coordinate with air assets for potential medical evacuation backup if convoy delays become critical. Time to decision: 47 seconds. Acceptable risk assessment. Continue. For the first time in the course, Rachel felt the confidence that came from trusting her training and instincts rather than second-guessing every choice. The sleepless nights and additional challenges were paying off in improved performance and, more importantly, improved self-trust. Her breakthrough came during the final comprehensive exercise, a 12-hour simulation that required coordinating supply operations across a fictional theater involving multiple countries, languages, and resource constraints. Rachel was assigned as Deputy Commander of Logistics Operations, responsible for managing supply chains while adapting to constantly changing tactical situations. 8 hours into the exercise, a major crisis developed. The primary supply depot was declared compromised by enemy action, eliminating 60% of available resources and forcing a complete reorganization of distribution networks. While other team members focused on immediate damage control, Rachel took a different approach.
I need access to the German logistics database and authorization to coordinate with host nation resources, she announced to the exercise controllers. That's outside normal protocols, one controller replied. Are you sure you want to complicate the scenario? Sergeant, real-world logistics often requires thinking beyond normal protocols. If we're truly cut off from primary resources, we need to explore all available alternatives. What followed was 2 hours of Rachel coordinating with German military personnel who were part of the exercise design, but rarely utilized by American trainees. Her Dari language study had improved her ability to learn basic German phrases quickly, and her research into international logistics protocols allowed her to identify resources that other teams hadn't considered. The result was a supply solution that not only compensated for the lost depot, but actually improved overall distribution efficiency. When the exercise concluded, the lead instructor, a German Bundeswehr logistics colonel, specifically commended Rachel's approach. Most American trainees focus on working harder when facing resource constraints. Specialist Jones demonstrated the more important skill of working smarter by leveraging available partnerships and thinking beyond traditional boundaries. The commendation was significant not just for Rachel's confidence, but for her military record. Such recognition from international instructors carried weight in promotion evaluations and future assignment considerations. During the flight back to Afghanistan, Rachel reflected on how much the training had changed her approach to problem solving. She had learned to balance thorough analysis with decisive action, to seek help when needed while taking responsibility for outcomes, and to view constraints as opportunities for creative solutions rather than insurmountable obstacles. More importantly, she had proven to herself that the financial pressures and family obligations that had driven her to seek advancement were not limiting her potential, they were actually pushing her to discover capabilities she might never have developed otherwise.
Upon returning to Bagram Airfield, Rachel found that word of her training success had preceded her. Major Sullivan called her in for a meeting the day after her return. Jones, I've received very positive feedback about your performance in Germany. Colonel Weber specifically mentioned your international coordination work and adaptive problem-solving skills. Thank you, ma'am. The training was challenging, but I learned a great deal. Based on this performance and your consistent excellence here, I'm recommending you for early promotion to corporal. The promotion board meets next month, and I believe you have a strong case. The promotion would mean a significant pay increase, helping offset the loan payments and providing more financial security. But more than the money, it represented validation that her strategic approach to career development was working. I also want to discuss future assignment possibilities, Major Sullivan continued. Your language skills, logistics expertise, and demonstrated ability to work in international environments make you a candidate for specialized assignments that could accelerate your career trajectory significantly. These opportunities represented the next phase of Rachel's military evolution. She was no longer just a competent soldier fulfilling family obligations. She was becoming someone the Army actively wanted to develop and retain for leadership positions. That evening, she video called home to share the news. Her family's reaction was enthusiastic, but she noticed that their pride seemed mixed with something else, a recognition that she was moving beyond their ability to fully understand her experiences and achievements. "We're so proud of you, honey," her mother said, "though I have to admit half of what you're telling us goes right over our heads." Her father added, "You're becoming someone pretty important over there. Just don't forget us regular folks back home." The comment was meant as a joke, but it highlighted a growing reality. Rachel's military experiences were creating a gap between her world and her family's world that went beyond simple geographic distance. She was developing skills, perspectives, and relationships that had no equivalent in Cedar Falls, Iowa. As she prepared for sleep that night, surrounded by the familiar sounds of military life, but with her mind full of new possibilities, Rachel Jones was no longer the uncertain young woman from Iowa who had signed loan papers to help her family. She was becoming a leader, a problem solver, and someone whose influence extended far beyond the people who shared her last name. The transformation was just beginning, and she had no idea how much further it would take her from the life and identity she had once known.
6 months after her promotion to corporal and assignment to a prestigious Joint Logistics Command position, Rachel's world came crashing down with a single phone call that would forever change her understanding of family, trust, and her own strength. It was a Tuesday morning in March when Staff Sergeant Chen from the finance office approached her during morning briefing with an expression she'd never seen before, a mixture of confusion, concern, and what looked like barely contained anger. "Corporal Jones, I need to speak with you privately. There's been some irregular activity on your loan account that requires immediate attention." Rachel followed him to his office, her mind racing through possibilities. Had there been a clerical error? A delay in payments? She'd been meticulous about ensuring the automatic deductions were processed correctly every month. "Rachel," Staff Sergeant Chen said, abandoning military formality as he closed the door, "I'm going to ask you directly. Did you authorize any changes to your loan terms or beneficiary information in the past 60 days? "No, Sergeant. I haven't made any changes since the original paperwork." "Why? What's happened?" Staff Sergeant Chen opened a file that seemed unusually thick for a routine inquiry. 3 weeks ago, someone claiming to be you contacted the loan servicing company and requested a modification to the payment structure. They provided your Social Security number, military ID number, and enough personal information to convince the representatives they were legitimate. Rachel's stomach dropped. What kind of modification? The monthly payment amount was reduced from $417 to $150, and the remaining balance was converted to a lump sum payment due immediately. Someone then claimed to be acting as your financial power of attorney and requested the entire remaining balance, $43,000, be transferred to an account they claimed you had established for family emergency purposes. The office seemed to tilt around Rachel as the implications hit her. "Are you telling me that someone stole $43,000 from my loan account?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you. And based on the personal information they had access to, it almost certainly had to be someone very close to you. Someone who knew details about your military service, your family situation, and your financial obligations. Rachel felt like she was drowning. The room spun as she tried to process not just the financial catastrophe, but the personal betrayal it represented. Only her immediate family had access to the kind of detailed information that would have been required to pull off this fraud. There's more, Staff Sergeant Chen continued gently. The account the money was transferred to was opened in Cedar Falls, Iowa, using forged documents that claimed you had established it during your last leave period. The bank records show the account was accessed multiple times over the past 2 weeks, with large cash withdrawals and transfers to several different accounts. Rachel's hands were shaking as she asked, "Do we know who opened the account?" The signature on file matches your brother, Marcus Jones, but the documents claim he was acting as your authorized representative. The problem is there's no record of you ever establishing such an authorization, and the paperwork shows clear signs of forgery. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound Rachel had ever experienced. Marcus, the brother she had worried about, the one whose job training she had funded, who had promised not to waste the opportunity her sacrifice had given him, he had stolen from her. But worse than that, he had destroyed her trust in the very concept of family loyalty. "What are my options?" Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're immediately initiating a military investigation through the Criminal Investigation Division. Because this involves fraud against military financial systems and a deployed service member, it falls under federal jurisdiction. We're also coordinating with civilian authorities in Iowa." Over the next 72 hours, Rachel learned the full scope of the betrayal. The investigation revealed that Marcus had not acted alone. Phone records showed extensive coordination with Emma, who had provided additional verification information when the loan company called to confirm details. Even more devastating, bank records indicated that their parents had withdrawn $8,000 in cash from the fraudulent account, suggesting they were either complicit in the scheme or willfully ignorant about the source of the sudden windfall. The family she had sacrificed for, worried about, and loved unconditionally had systematically stolen from her while she was serving her country thousands of miles away. Special Agent Jennifer Martinez from CID interviewed Rachel extensively about her family relationships and the circumstances surrounding the original loan. The questions forced Rachel to confront uncomfortable truths about her family dynamics that she had been avoiding for years. "Corporal Jones, looking back at your family's financial requests and behavior patterns, do you see any warning signs that might have predicted this betrayal?" Agent Martinez asked during one particularly difficult session.
Rachel thought carefully before responding. "I think I wanted to believe in them so badly that I ignored red flags. Marcus had a history of unreliable behavior, but I convinced myself that my help would change that. Emma was always focused on what others could do for her, but I told myself that was just immaturity. And my parents, they always seemed to accept help without question, like they deserved it somehow." "Why do you think you ignored these patterns?" "Because acknowledging them would have meant accepting that my family wasn't who I needed them to be. It was easier to believe that love and sacrifice could transform people than to face the reality that some people will take advantage of love and sacrifice." The investigation moved quickly. Within 2 weeks, federal charges were filed against Marcus and Emma for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Their parents were charged as accessories after the fact for knowingly benefiting from the proceeds of the fraud. When Rachel finally called her parents after the charges were filed, the conversation was unlike anything she had ever experienced. "Rachel, honey, you have to understand," her mother pleaded through tears. "We didn't know what Marcus and Emma were planning. They told us you had authorized the money transfer for a family emergency fund." "Mom, did you really believe that I would authorize $43,000 to be transferred without talking to you first? Did you really think I would make that kind of decision without discussing it with the people it was supposed to help?" Her father's voice was heavy with shame when he finally spoke. "We wanted to believe it.
We've been struggling so much, and when they said you had found a way to help us more, we didn't ask the questions we should have asked. Dad, I need you to understand something. This wasn't just about money. You all violated my trust in the worst possible way. You took advantage of my love for you while I was serving my country. I don't know how to forgive that. The conversation ended with no resolution, no apology that felt adequate to the magnitude of the betrayal, and no clear path forward for their relationships. But something remarkable happened in the weeks that followed. As Rachel processed the devastating loss of her family as she had known them, she discovered reserves of strength and resilience that she hadn't known she possessed. The crisis forced her to build new support systems and rely on the military community in ways that deepened her professional relationships and personal growth. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hendricks, her new commanding officer, called her in for what Rachel expected to be a disciplinary discussion about the investigation's impact on her security clearance and career prospects. Instead, Colonel Hendricks said, "Corporal Jones, I've been following your situation closely. What happened to you represents a profound betrayal, but your response to it has been exemplary. You've continued to excel in your duties while cooperating fully with the investigation. That kind of character under pressure is exactly what we look for in future leaders." "Thank you, ma'am, but I'm not sure what kind of future I have anymore. The financial situation alone..." "Let me stop you there. The Army takes care of its own, especially when they've been victimized while serving. We're arranging for the loan to be restructured based on the fraudulent activity. More importantly, I'm recommending you for the Advanced Leadership Development Program. It's a fast track to sergeant rank and opens doors to assignments that will accelerate your career significantly." This conversation marked the beginning of Rachel's transformation from victim to victor. Instead of allowing the betrayal to define her, she channeled her anger and hurt into professional excellence and personal growth that exceeded anything she might have achieved without facing this crisis. Over the following months, as legal proceedings unfolded back in Iowa, Rachel threw herself into military service with renewed purpose. She completed advanced training programs, earned additional certifications, and began mentoring younger soldiers who were facing their own challenges with family and financial pressures. The trial concluded with Marcus receiving 2 years in federal prison and Emma receiving 18 months. Their parents received probation and were ordered to make restitution. The financial recovery was partial. About $27,000 was recovered from various accounts, but the emotional recovery was complete. Rachel realized that losing the family she thought she had was actually the catalyst for finding the family she truly needed, her military brothers and sisters, who understood sacrifice, loyalty, and honor in ways her biological family never had. When Rachel Jones, now Sergeant Jones, and stationed at the Pentagon in a prestigious logistics planning role, received a letter from Marcus in prison, it was full of apologies, regret, and promises to make things right someday. She read it once, then filed it away without responding. Some betrayals were too profound for forgiveness to bridge, and some relationships were too toxic to preserve, regardless of blood connections. Instead, she focused on the future she was building through her own choices and efforts. The young woman who had left Cedar Falls to serve her country and help her family had evolved into a leader who understood that the most important family was the one you chose, and the most meaningful service was the kind that came from strength rather than obligation. Rachel Jones had lost $43,000 and the family she thought she knew. In return, she had gained wisdom, resilience, and a clear vision of her own worth and capabilities. It was the most expensive education she had ever received and the most valuable. Her story became an inspiration to other military personnel facing family pressures and financial challenges. She learned to share her experience not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the greatest victories, not over others, but over the limitations we place on ourselves and the lies we tell ourselves about who deserves our love and sacrifice. The girl from Iowa who had believed that family meant everything discovered that family meant nothing if it wasn't built on mutual respect, genuine love, and shared values. And in learning that painful lesson, she became someone far stronger and more purposeful than she had ever imagined possible. Rachel Jones had finally come home. Not to a place, but to herself.
5 years after the betrayal that shattered her world, Staff Sergeant Rachel Jones stood before a packed auditorium at Fort Leavenworth's Command and General Staff College, preparing to deliver the keynote address to graduating officers. At 28, she had become one of the youngest non-commissioned officers ever invited to speak at the prestigious institution, and her story had become legendary throughout military leadership circles. But today wasn't about her military achievements, her rapid promotions, or even her recovery from financial fraud. Today was about something far more profound: how betrayal had become the catalyst for discovering her true purpose in life. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rachel began, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had faced the worst and emerged stronger, "I want to tell you about the day I learned that losing everything you thought you wanted can lead to finding everything you never knew you needed." The audience fell silent. These were seasoned military professionals who had heard countless speeches about leadership, sacrifice, and service. But there was something in Rachel's presence, an authenticity born from genuine struggle, that commanded their attention in ways that polished presentations never could. 5 years ago, I was a different person. I was someone who believed that love was measured by how much you were willing to sacrifice, that family loyalty was unconditional, and that doing the right thing would always be rewarded. I was naive, perhaps, but that naivety came from a good place, a desire to believe the best about the people I cared about most. Rachel paused, looking out at the faces in the audience. She could see young officers who reminded her of herself at 23, full of idealism and untested by real betrayal. She could also see veteran leaders who carried their own scars from discovering that good intentions weren't always enough. What I'm going to share with you isn't a story about military tactics or leadership theory. It's about something more fundamental: how to rebuild your sense of purpose when the people you trusted most prove themselves unworthy of that trust, and how to transform devastating personal failure into lasting professional success. Over the next hour, Rachel shared not just the facts of her story, but the emotional journey that had accompanied her transformation. She spoke about the sleepless nights in Afghanistan when she questioned everything she believed about human nature. She described the moment she realized that her family's betrayal hadn't diminished her. It had revealed strengths she never knew she possessed. The investigation that followed the fraud taught me something crucial about leadership. The way you respond to crisis defines you far more than the crisis itself. I could have become bitter, could have allowed their betrayal to poison my trust in all relationships. Instead, I chose to become more discerning about who earned my trust and more generous with those who proved themselves worthy of it. She described how the military community had rallied around her, not with pity, but with respect for how she had handled an impossible situation. Senior officers who had initially viewed her as just another young soldier began recognizing her potential for significant leadership roles. Her response to personal crisis had demonstrated the kind of character they wanted in positions of responsibility. Colonel Martinez, who oversaw part of the investigation, told me something that changed my entire perspective. She said, "Jones, anyone can be loyal when loyalty is easy. Real character is revealed when loyalty becomes costly." I realized that my family had failed that test, but I didn't have to fail it too. Rachel's voice grew stronger as she moved into the heart of her message. The money they stole was significant, $43,000 that I had borrowed to help them build better lives. But what they couldn't steal was what I had built in myself: discipline, integrity, and the ability to create value through service to something greater than personal interests. She described the program she had initiated over the past 5 years, starting with informal mentorship of soldiers facing family financial pressures and growing into a comprehensive support network that had helped hundreds of military personnel navigate complex personal challenges while maintaining professional excellence. 3 years ago, I established the Military Family Financial Security Initiative, a program that provides education,
counseling, and emergency assistance to service members whose family situations create financial vulnerability. We've prevented dozens of situations like mine from occurring, not by teaching people to distrust their families, but by teaching them to set healthy boundaries and make informed decisions about financial assistance. The program had gained national attention, earning Rachel recognition from military leadership and civilian financial institutions. More importantly, it had given her a sense of purpose that transcended her personal experience and created lasting positive change in the lives of others. Last month, I received a letter from Corporal Martinez, no relation to Colonel Martinez, a young soldier from Texas whose family had pressured her into taking out loans to fund her brother's business venture. Using the resources we provided, she was able to help her brother legitimately while protecting her own financial future. She wrote to tell me that our program had taught her the difference between helping and enabling, between love and manipulation.
Rachel's eyes brightened as she continued. That letter reminded me why the betrayal I experienced wasn't really about money at all. It was about learning to recognize authentic relationships versus exploitative ones, about developing the wisdom to distinguish between people who deserve investment and people who demand it. She shared how this wisdom had transformed not just her personal relationships, but her approach to military leadership. As a supply logistics coordinator at the Pentagon, she now oversaw resource allocation decisions involving millions of dollars and thousands of personnel. The analytical skills and emotional resilience she had developed through personal crisis had made her exceptionally effective at managing complex logistical challenges under pressure. General Thompson recently told me that my ability to make difficult decisions quickly and stand by them confidently was directly related to what I had learned about trusting my own judgment when external pressures tried to override it. The family crisis that nearly destroyed me had actually prepared me for leadership responsibilities I never could have imagined. Rachel's story took an unexpected turn as she described a letter she had received just 6 months earlier. It was from Marcus, now released from prison and working as a welder in Minnesota. The letter wasn't asking for forgiveness or money, it was expressing gratitude for the lesson her response had taught him about accountability and personal responsibility. He wrote that watching me rebuild my life without bitterness or revenge had shown him what real strength looked like. He said that my refusal to enable his destructive behavior had been the best thing that could have happened to him, even though it came at a terrible cost to our relationship. The letter had included documentation that Marcus was paying restitution, not just to Rachel, but to a victim assistance fund she had established. He was also volunteering with a program that helped former inmates develop job skills and make genuine amends for their crimes. I don't know if Marcus and I will ever have a relationship again, Rachel said honestly. The trust that was broken was fundamental, and some damage can't be repaired just because someone is sorry. But seeing him take genuine responsibility for his choices and work to prevent others from making similar mistakes, that's worth more than any apology. Rachel's parents had also attempted contact over the years, but their approach remained focused on excusing their behavior rather than taking responsibility for it. Rachel had learned to accept this as information about their character rather than a reflection of her worth as a daughter. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I can wish them well without welcoming them back into my life. I can hope they find happiness without making their happiness my responsibility. As her speech drew to a close, Rachel addressed the broader implications of her experience for military leadership and personal development. The greatest gift that crisis can offer is clarity. When everything you thought you knew about loyalty, love, and family is stripped away, you discover what you actually know about courage, integrity, and your own capacity for growth. The betrayal that nearly destroyed me became the foundation for building a life of genuine purpose and authentic relationships. She looked directly at the young officers in the front rows. Some of you will face similar betrayals. People you love will disappoint you, take advantage of your generosity, or fail to meet the standards you believe family relationships require. When that happens, remember that their failure doesn't define your worth or limit your potential.
Rachel's final words carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. The family that raised me taught me about unconditional love by violating it. The military family I chose taught me about conditional love by earning it every day. I learned that the most important relationship you'll ever have is with your own integrity, and that relationship is the only one that's truly under your control. The standing ovation lasted several minutes, but what moved Rachel most were the individual conversations that followed. Young officers shared their own stories of family pressure and financial manipulation. Senior leaders spoke about difficult decisions they'd made to protect their careers and principles from family members who didn't understand or respect their service. As Rachel prepared to leave Fort Leavenworth that evening, she reflected on how completely her life had changed. The young woman from Iowa who had joined the military to help her family had become a leader whose influence extended to thousands of service members across all branches of the military. Her story had become more than personal testimony. It was proof that betrayal could become a teacher, that crisis could become a catalyst, and that losing the family you were born into could lead to finding the family you were meant to serve. Staff Sergeant Rachel Jones had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that your greatest strength often emerges not from what you gain, but how you respond to what you lose. And in learning that lesson, she had gained something far more valuable than the money her family had stolen. She had gained unshakable confidence in her own worth and an unbreakable commitment to using her story to help others discover their own strength. The girl from Cedar Falls was gone. In her place stood a woman whose legacy would outlast any betrayal and whose impact would extend far beyond any personal loss. Rachel Jones had finally come home, not to a place or even to people, but to the unshakable knowledge of who she truly was and what she was capable of becoming.
10 years after leaving Cedar Falls with dreams of serving her country and helping her family, Master Sergeant Rachel Jones returned to Iowa for the first time since her mother's funeral 3 years earlier. But this wasn't a homecoming in any traditional sense. It was the culmination of a journey that had transformed not just her life, but the lives of countless others who had found hope in her story. The occasion was the dedication of the Jones Military Family Support Center, a $2.3 million facility funded through a combination of federal grants, private donations, and proceeds from Rachel's best-selling memoir, Betrayed into Strength, A Soldier's Journey from Family Fraud to Military Leadership. The irony wasn't lost on her that a center bearing her family name had been built to prevent other military families from experiencing the betrayal that had defined her own. Standing in the parking lot of what had once been the abandoned textile factory on the outskirts of Cedar Falls, Rachel surveyed the transformed building that would soon house financial counseling services, legal aid clinics, and support groups for military families nationwide. The center represented something unprecedented, a comprehensive resource designed specifically to address the intersection of military service and family financial exploitation. "You ready for this?" asked Colonel Patricia Williams, Rachel's former mentor who had flown in from Washington, D.C. for the ceremony. Colonel Williams had been instrumental in helping Rachel navigate the early stages of her military career after the betrayal, and their relationship had evolved from mentorship to genuine friendship built on mutual respect. "As ready as someone can be to dedicate a building in honor of the family that tried to destroy her," Rachel replied with the dry humor that had become her trademark. "Though I suppose there's something poetic about it. They took money intended to help people, and now that betrayal has generated resources to help thousands of people." The dedication ceremony drew an unexpected crowd. Military personnel from bases across the Midwest had traveled to attend, many of them soldiers whose lives had been touched by Rachel's advocacy work. Local Cedar Falls residents came out of curiosity, civic pride, and in some cases, genuine admiration for what their hometown had produced despite itself. Among the crowd were faces Rachel hadn't seen in years, former high school classmates, neighbors from Elm Street, teachers who remembered the serious young woman who had always seemed destined for something beyond their small town. Their expressions ranged from pride to bewilderment to something approaching awe as they struggled to reconcile the Rachel they remembered with the accomplished military leader standing before them. But the most significant presence was Marcus, now 35, and accompanied by his wife Sarah and their 2 young children. He had driven down from Minneapolis, where he had built a successful welding business specializing in military and government contracts. His transformation from the irresponsible young man who had stolen from his sister was so complete that Rachel sometimes struggled to see traces of her former brother in the man he had become. Their relationship remained complicated, not hostile, but not exactly familial either. They exchanged Christmas cards, brief updates on professional achievements, and occasional texts on birthdays. It was cordial, respectful, but deliberately limited. Some betrayals created permanent boundaries, even when forgiveness had been granted. "I never expected to see this," Marcus said quietly as he approached Rachel before the ceremony began. "A building with our family name that actually helps people instead of hurting them." "It's not really about our family name anymore," Rachel replied, studying his face for any trace of the self-serving manipulation that had once defined their interactions. "It's about what can be built from the wreckage of broken trust." Marcus nodded, seeming to understand the deeper meaning. "I know I can never undo what I did to you, Rachel, but seeing what you've built from that damage, it makes me believe that maybe some good can come from even the worst mistakes." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of General Michael Rodriguez, the commanding officer of the Army's Financial Readiness Campaign, who had flown in specifically to speak at the dedication. General Rodriguez had become one of Rachel's strongest advocates within military leadership, recognizing that her unique perspective on family financial exploitation filled a critical gap in military support services. "Master Sergeant Jones," General Rodriguez said as he approached, "I've just finished reviewing the preliminary data from the pilot programs we've implemented based on your recommendations. The results are even better than we projected, a 63% reduction in family-related financial distress among participating units." The statistics represented more than numbers to Rachel. They represented individual soldiers who wouldn't have to choose between helping family and protecting their own financial security. Families who would learn healthy boundaries before crisis struck, and young service members who would enter military careers with better tools for navigating complex personal relationships. As the dedication ceremony began, Rachel found herself reflecting on the unexpected trajectory her life had taken. The young woman who had left Cedar Falls 10 years ago had been motivated by love for family and a desire to serve her country. Those motivations remained, but they had been refined by experience into something more sustainable and ultimately more effective. Her keynote address to the assembled crowd was different from the speeches she had given at military installations and leadership conferences. This audience included civilians who didn't necessarily understand military culture, family members of service personnel who might be struggling with their own financial pressures, and young people from Cedar Falls who were considering military service themselves. "When I left this town 10 years ago, I thought I understood what service meant. I thought it meant sacrificing for the people you love, putting their needs before your own, and proving your loyalty through how much you were willing to give up for them."
She paused, looking out at the crowd that included faces from every chapter of her life: childhood neighbors, military colleagues, and complete strangers who had been drawn by her story. "I learned the hard way that real service isn't about sacrificing yourself for others. It's about building yourself into someone strong enough to help others without being destroyed by the process. It's about developing the wisdom to know the difference between helping someone and enabling them, between love and manipulation, between family loyalty and family exploitation." Rachel described how the center would offer services that hadn't existed when she was struggling with her family's financial pressures: legal advice for service members facing family financial manipulation, counseling for spouses dealing with extended family conflicts, and educational programs teaching young soldiers about healthy financial boundaries. "The families we serve won't all have stories as dramatic as mine," she continued. "Most will be dealing with more subtle pressures. Parents who expect regular financial support beyond what their military children can afford. Siblings who view military pay as family property.
or spouses whose families create ongoing financial obligations that strain military marriages. She shared statistics that had shocked even her. Nearly 40% of junior enlisted personnel reported family financial pressure as a significant source of stress, and family-related financial problems were cited as contributing factors in over half of military divorces involving personnel under age 25. But this center isn't just about preventing problems. It's about empowering service members to build the kinds of family relationships they deserve. Relationships based on mutual respect, genuine care, and healthy boundaries. Relationships that support military service rather than undermining it. Rachel's speech included acknowledgments that surprised many in the audience. She thanked her parents, who had died within a year of each other 5 years earlier, for raising her with values that ultimately helped her survive their betrayal. She thanked Marcus for teaching her about accountability through his genuine efforts to make amends. She even thanked Emma, who had moved to California after completing her prison sentence and had never attempted contact, for showing her the importance of accepting when relationships couldn't be repaired. Every person who hurt me also taught me something valuable about strength, boundaries, and the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. I wouldn't wish betrayal on anyone, but I'm grateful for the lessons it taught me and the person it helped me become. As the ceremony concluded with the ribbon cutting, Rachel was approached by a young woman in Army dress uniform who introduced herself as Private First Class Jennifer Martinez from Fort Riley, Kansas. Master Sergeant, I wanted to thank you personally. I read your book last year when my family was pressuring me to co-sign loans for my brother's business. Your story helped me understand that saying no to family financial demands wasn't selfish. It was necessary for both my military career and our long-term relationships. These conversations had become routine for Rachel, but they never lost their impact. Each person who shared how her story had influenced their decisions reminded her that the betrayal she had experienced hadn't been meaningless suffering. It had been the catalyst for preventing suffering in others. That evening, as Rachel prepared to return to her assignment at the Pentagon, she took one final walk through downtown Cedar Falls. The town hadn't changed much in the decades since she had left, but her perspective on it had transformed completely. She no longer saw it as a place that had held her back or a source of painful memories. Instead, she saw it as the starting point for a journey that had led her to discover capabilities and purposes she never could have imagined. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Sergeant First Class David Chen, one of her former subordinates who now ran financial counseling programs at Fort Bragg. Saw the news coverage of the center dedication. Proud to have served under someone who turned personal pain into public service. You've changed more lives than you'll ever know. As Rachel drove toward the airport, leaving Cedar Falls in her rearview mirror, she realized that this visit had provided something she hadn't expected. Closure not just with her past, but with the person she used to be. The young woman who had left this town had been defined by her relationships with others. Daughter, sister, helper, sacrificer. The woman driving away was defined by her relationship with herself. Leader, advocate, mentor, survivor. Master Sergeant Rachel Jones had finally completed the journey that began with betrayal and led to something far more valuable than the trust that had been broken. Unshakable confidence in her own worth and an unbreakable commitment to helping others discover theirs. The road ahead led back to Washington, back to responsibilities that would continue shaping military policy and supporting service members facing their own family challenges. But more importantly, it led toward a future built not on the foundation of others' expectations or needs, but on the solid ground of her own values, choices, and hard-won wisdom. Rachel Jones had come full circle, but she was no longer the same person who had started the journey. And that transformation, from betrayed daughter to empowered leader, was the greatest victory of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.